I already pressed play. Okay, so this is B&B True Crime. I'm one of the B's, you're the other B.
I am the B.
And you're gonna tell me about true crime.
I'm going to tell you about true crime.
So you have Boy in a Box.
Boy in a Box, that is the first case we're doing.
Oh,
The
hey.
Boy in the Box.
Alright. Give me them facts, B. Tell me about Boy in the Box. I'm gonna eat my gyoza.
Okay.
You tell me.
We have Scran. If you want to get Scran, get Scran.
Scran's always good when you're talking about dead bodies.
We're about to delve into, unfortunately, the Boy in the Box. So,
Heard it.
I'm Beth. She's Becky.
B&B.
I like my crime. She's learning about crime. Bear with us. So, it's February 1957. I'm setting the stage, right? A boy's body is discovered wrapped in a blanket in the woods in Philadelphia, America. Okay.
Is he in a box?
Yes.
Okay.
That hence, the title, The Boy in the Box.
Got it.
He is, in fact, shockingly, in a box.
In a box.
In a box. The naked body.
That's a little weird.
Yeah. The naked body. Oh, also, he's quite young, so the age range, because they can't really predict his exact age because of, the condition of the body and because, they don't know who the boy is. So the age range is anywhere from about 6 to, at most, 10. So quite a young boy in this box.
Small,
yeah, it's a small boy, hence why he fits in the box.
Cool.
So his naked body was found inside a cardboard box.
Okay.
That once, these boxes were quite specific, and they once apparently stored a bassinet, which is like a crib. And before they IKEA build it, that's what these cribs would come in.
Wow. You can track what shit's in a box.
Yeah.
Trippy.
So,
okay. Bassinet box.
A bassinet box. So they did in fact search on these bassinet boxes because it found out they located it to a store, and they pretty much they found out that only so many of this specific bassinets were sold. So apparently only 12 of these bassinets were ever sold in America and in this general area. So not a lot.
There wasn't a lead for them?
Well, the most they ever got with the bassinet boxes is basically they put an ad out to be like, okay, we found this boy in a box. He was in this type of box. If any of, of the general public bought a bassinet that matches this box, come forward. They couldn't really track them because pretty much they were all paid for in cash.
Oh, that's a great idea. Here, general public, we have very specific details of the crime. Hand yourself over, please.
Yeah, pretty much.
Anybody's gonna come forward and be like, oh, my bad, I left the box.
You would be surprised. 8 people out of the 12 came forward
to say... because they were innocent.
Exactly. So that's 8
Three
out of 12.
Them. 3 of them are lazy buggers and the other one's guilty.
Yeah, but they could not ever locate the 4 people who didn't come forward. So basically 8 people came forward to be like, hey, we still have the bassinet, most of which of these 8 people still had the box. So they were ruled out.
Suspicious.
Yeah. The missing 4, however, never came forward.
So dead end on the box.
Yeah, it was dead end on the box, unfortunately.
Straight out the gate we've got a dead end.
Yeah, so, they did try with the box, but, it didn't really get anywhere, unfortunately.
Big shame.
Yeah, lead turned cold. So in terms of the boy's description and, what he was seen to be found while he was in the box and discovered in the box is, so obviously he was naked, like I said before, naked young boy in a box. He wore a special made hat. Bit random. But they did also...
Wait, he's naked wearing a hat?
I don't know if he was wearing the hat in the box. But there was a hat
in the box.
Either in the box or near the box.
Okay.
That was the same size as I'm assuming the boy. So basically, obviously, like the bassinet box, they did also do, they looked into the hat since it seemed tailor-made. They found the shop where it was purchased because it was so tailor-made.
Oh, okay.
From the label inside the hat. They
Well
located
done,
the shop. Yeah, exactly. The woman who owned the shop said that she made the hat.
Mm.
So she had talked to the person who had bought the hat. Strong link to the crime there.
Why no suspect?
Well, first of all, the person paid in cash. Or, yeah, you'll see that a lot. It's the way to get out of crime, apparently. Just pay cash. Pay cash.
This is why we're all going to go to prison if we ever commit a crime, because we're too lazy to have cash on us. We're going to be paying card.
Exactly. Nowadays, everyone pays card. But back then, obviously, cards weren't really a thing much.
They were used for big purchases.
Yeah. And
not for everyday stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Got you.
So the woman was able to give a description.
So let me guess. He wore a hat and sunglasses.
Kind of. Like, she could remember what he looked like. She didn't have, like, unfortunately, any records of the name, because in those days, a lot of people, you know, for example, if there's a crime that we might look into in the future where this guy buys special shoes and he has them custom made, and a lot of people back then would keep, like, ledgers and stuff with all the names of the people, especially if they were tailor-made, with, you know, and then if they committed a crime, that would help the police.
That seems like something you would record.
Exactly. Unfortunately, this woman did not record this one. Of course, she didn't.
Dumb.
Yeah, so that helps us in this case. But the police learnt that the custom-made hat was made. Again, I'm not sure if the hat was made for the boy or for the man, but definitely linked to the case.
The hat was made, and the boy had it.
The man, so the woman who owned the shop was called Mrs. Robbins. She said that the man who had bought the hat and asked for it to be customised was between the ages of 26 and 30. So that already gives us a suspect of a man in that age bracket. He apparently had blonde hair and no, unfortunately, identifiable accent. Yeah, so a pretty standard guy.
Generic blonde guy.
Generic blonde, you know, younger man. And yeah, like I said, that he paid cash. And she apparently never saw him again. Don't know why she wouldn't have still had the name for this man, considering, you know, it was special order, so I'm assuming she can't have done it on the day. So he would have surely have had to come back for the hat.
Unless he came in the morning.
And she was done by the evening.
And she was done by the evening, and she said, I should be able to have it done for you by the evening. Come back just before we close and you can grab your hat.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so.
No need for Mr. Blonde, no name.
No name.
To have to come back.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, as much digging as they did with this, it was also, like the bassinet box, another dead end.
Dead end.
Yeah, dead end. So, they also saw that in terms of the boy that was in the box, his hair had been recently cut because they found like on his body they found like little like clippings of hair. You know when you go to the hairdressers and they cut your hair
and they don't quite get it all off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know they use that fancy brush to brush it all off. You know the excess hair, the little ones. They found all that kind of shit on his body. So it can't have been cut that long from when he died.
Maybe they cut it after he died.
Or it could have been after he died, yeah. Maybe so. Again, yeah, it could have been after death. There were severe signs of malnutrition on the boy.
Boy was abused.
Possibly, yeah. As well, weirdly enough, as surgical scars on his ankle and groin. And he also weirdly had a distinct L-shaped scar on his chin. I do also want to point out that the police did a search for missing people at the time, missing boys. No records.
Okay.
There was no boys in that age range that looked like the boy in the box that were reported missing. So it clearly
either no one was missing him,
yeah,
or no one wanted to draw attention to the fact that the boy had gone bye-byes.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, they did try. They did also take his fingerprints, and they were really sure they were going to come back with a match, because that was around the time they started fingerprinting, for example, kids at birth.
Okay.
So they thought he would be on some kind of file somewhere. They also did his footprints. Unfortunately, nothing. His prints did not show up anywhere.
I'm detecting a theme here.
Yeah, there is quite a theme. So they came to establish that either he wasn't reported to have been born, which would make sense why his prints weren't matching anywhere, or he was like a home birth and then just was never taken to the hospital or recorded, and then obviously recorded then as being here, you know, alive.
This thing exists.
Yeah, so there was nothing whatsoever.
Which would explain the abuse. If there's no records of the boy, they wouldn't check up on it.
Exactly. So around the time that they, you know, often in crimes they have to call them like John Doe, Jane Doe, that kind of thing. So
Baby Doe.
Baby Doe. Around the time the body was found, the weather had been quite cold and rainy. And, you know, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that probably the weather did not help evidence in that case, you know, any footprints.
Decomposing body and the destruction of evidence.
To be fair, the body hadn't decomposed that much. It might have helped from being in the box. Or it could just mean that the boy wasn't out there for very long before being discovered.
I mean, it's got to be pretty easy to see a ginormous box in the middle of a field.
You would imagine so. But the way he was found is also a bit weird, but in a way I kind of understand it. I mean, I'll go into it, but it's just...
don't tease me, get on with it.
So because of the weather, it also made determining not only his age, and because there has been slight decomposition,
but TOD.
But exactly, time of death. It was really hard to figure out, but they don't think it would have been long until the body was in this box, in the woods. In the end, the medical examiner estimated that he could have died anywhere from a few days before being found to a few weeks, but like a couple weeks max.
So 2 to 14 days.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. That's the best he could put it down to.
That's not very helpful.
It's not very helpful, but, you know, at least they got a rough estimate. However, the medical examiner did lean towards it being a few days because of, you know, the decomposition and everything like that. So...
What about freezing? What if he was frozen? Is there a sign of freezing?
It doesn't say so. The box, however, that the boy was found in was mostly dry though. So considering the weather had been like cold and rainy, that's why the medical examiner doesn't think he was out there that long. But then obviously the rain and stuff.
The box would have started to break down, it's only cardboard.
Yeah, and obviously with the rain, it would have washed away things like footprints and all that kind of shit, so.
Yeah, Mother Nature.
So, in terms of finding the body, so this is going to sound really, really weird, but I guess if you think about it, and you think about what you would do in this situation, it kind of makes sense. So, the boy was actually found a lot sooner than the date that he was officially found on.
Don't tell me someone found him and walked away.
Literally.
Oh my God.
Literally, that's what happened. So, guy comes up, he's apparently known for setting traps in the woods for stuff, you know, living his life. But apparently the traps he was setting up in the woods weren't really, like, police-friendly. I don't know if it was completely legal. So
he's an illegal hunter?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
So he'd gone out into the woods and found the boy in the box. And because he was doing some slightly, maybe not really legal things with his traps in the woods, he didn't phone the police. He didn't report it.
Well done, my guy.
Yeah. And basically, his other reason, he did eventually come forward and be like, oh yeah, I did find the box, but, you know, here's why. I didn't say nothing. And it wasn't long before it was officially discovered. I'm talking like maybe like the day or so before.
Okay.
So, you know, it wasn't like, he didn't leave it for like massively long, because it was found pretty quick. Obviously being this massive box in the middle of
nowhere,
the woods. So his other reason as to why he didn't report it was that he didn't want to be suspected of putting the boy in the box and killing the boy.
The old, I didn't want to say anything, you'd think I'd done it.
Literally.
Defense.
Yes. A few days later, we're not sure how many days, because obviously we don't know the time of death, another man comes, a college student. I'm not going to ask why he was in the woods. Not important.
As a college student, I don't want to know why he's in the woods.
Exactly. College student comes, he's in the woods, he finds the box. He does report it. So
Good
now
boy.
the police are aware of the boy in the box.
Good bean.
However, he does admit that he was reluctant to report it at all. For the same reasons as the other guy.
Okay.
He don't want to be suspected. So, as weird as it sounds, like they're not reporting finding this dead boy in a box, at the same time it kind of makes sense because, like, if
you are the first person they're going to look at.
Exactly.
Even if only to, like, exclude you.
Exactly.
They are going to still treat you as a... Okay, yeah, alright, fair.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, what would... I mean, imagine you're just out in the woods for any generic reason.
You know, in my frequent trips to the woods.
Yeah, and then, you know, you find this dead boy in a box. What do you do? Like, do you report it? Do you just pretend you didn't see it? It's like...
Boy in a box? What boy in a box? I saw nothing.
Exactly, like, what would you actually do in that situation?
Right, fair, you've logicked me up now.
I don't know what I would do in that situation myself, to be honest. Can't say I've ever thought about if I did find a dead boy in a box.
I would like to think that I would call the police, because, you know, it's a dead body of a child. I'd like to think I would call the police.
Yeah, we'd like to think we would, but would we in that situation? Hopefully we'll never find out. I can't say there's a lot of cases of boys being found in boxes, so...
I'm just saying, if you find a dead body and you don't call me first, I'm going to be really upset. I'm going to be really upset, okay?
You can't be the first person I call if I do then report it, because then that's going to make me look so suspicious.
Why?
Because I'm calling my best friend before I call the police to tell you that I found a dead boy in a box. How's that not weird?
Your bestie, you're supposed to call me when things happen.
Right, you can be my second call
Wow,
if I do
that's
report
insane.
it.
Exactly, and if you don't, I'm your first call. It's fine.
There you go. You can have that.
Wow.
So, they also did a lot in terms of publicity about the boy. They put a lot of flyers out. And I'm talking like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. And they were all like, if you have any information of the boy, you know, they had the picture of the boy on the flyer. I'll show you the boy now. This is the state of the body of the boy in the box. So it's not a great picture. Obviously, you can see he's been, like, I don't want to say abused, but he definitely...
He has facial injuries.
He looks very much deceased, unfortunately. So basically, you know, they did all this, you know. Then they were also like, you know, if you want to come and identify the boy, you can do that. So they had him up in the morgue, identifying him. People from at least 10 states came all the way down to try and identify this boy, and unfortunately...
No one could confirm.
No one could identify them. Which is very sad.
To be fair, there's not much left to identify.
There isn't, but you know what, his full body was there. It wasn't in horrendously bad condition. But
clearly, someone didn't want this boy found.
Exactly.
And they certainly weren't going to come be and be like, oh yeah.
That's my boy.
That's my boy.
Yeah, it's suspect number 1. Okay, so the crime scene itself was combed over by hundreds of policemen and policewomen.
Oh.
So yeah, that is when they discovered the cap found with the boy. So I'm going to assume that it wasn't in the box with the boy. It must have been in the surrounding area.
Okay.
They found a child's scarf, but it must have been, you know, quite generic because as far as I've researched, there's nothing about the scarf.
Okay.
They found a man's white handkerchief with the letter G in the corner. But again, they looked into it and it was just as vague as the scarf. They couldn't find anything. Yeah. So all clues literally led nowhere.
So you've just got a dead boy in a box,
Dead boy in a box.
and that's it.
So, well, from here we do go to the theories, however, and there's some quite juicy ones.
Okay.
Nothing has ever been confirmed though. The case is officially, unfortunately,
Unsolved.
unsolved to this day. And I think it's been about 64 years or so since he was found, roughly.
64 years!
That is according to Wikipedia, so don't at me if that's...
We're doing wiki research here, boys.
So, there's two main theories, but then there's like a bunch of little ones. Obviously, I'm going to go into the two main ones first. I might touch on the little ones, but the first one is okay.
Okay.
The second one, I feel like sounds the most legit.
Okay. Let's start with the least legit one.
So, out of the two main theories, this is the one that I don't feel as strongly that this could be it.
Okay.
But, you know, they give good reasoning, but we're going to go into it. Okay. So, and I just want to point out the police have explored everything with these theories and still can't find anything, nothing concrete, nothing.
Yeah. Okay.
So the first theory is the theory of the foster home in Philadelphia, which was only located 1.5 miles away from where the body's body in the box was found.
Okay, so feasible.
Feasible, not that far.
Although technically, if you want to get out of the range of suspicion, you should take it at least 2 kilometers away.
True, but if you have the body of a dead boy, you're gonna maybe panic. Just want to dispose of it as quickly as possible. And to be fair, they did get away with it.
Alright, yeah, fair, okay.
So, the foster home. So the beginning of this is just ridiculous, so that's why I'm not feeling this theory as much. So this investigator who was obsessed with this crime and really wanted to solve it, no, never obviously did, he contacted a psychic.
Okay, alright.
The basis for good old theories.
I would just like to say that you believe in Ouija boards, and the psychic is where you're like, nah, bruh.
I just don't believe in psychics, I'm sorry, I don't. They would have to have really good information, but like, I've seen too many fake psychics who all like get their stuff off like social media and all that kind of shit, and I can't. So basically, they took the psychic to the crime scene.
Okay.
Of the boy in the box. They didn't tell them really anything. You know, they didn't really show them any pictures or anything. The psychic from there takes them to this foster home, which is 1.5 miles away.
Okay.
So I'm going to assume it's the closest one to the boy in the box. So the foster home at this point is for sale.
Okay.
Random fact for you there. However, a bassinet similar to the one that the boy was in
London, yeah.
was found at this foster home.
Okay. And let me guess, no box.
No what, sorry?
No box.
No box.
No
No
box.
box. No box.
Called it.
They also did discover blankets, because if you remember at the beginning, I said the boy was wrapped naked in a blanket in the box. They couldn't really gather
More
much.
blankets.
Yeah, exactly. More blankets, similar to the one he was wrapped in.
Okay.
They never did get much in evidence with the blanket, so this was like the closest to the blanket that they could get.
Okay.
And it was hanging on the clothesline of this foster home.
Okay.
The blanket. So Bristow, who is the psychic, believed that the boy belonged to the stepdaughter of the man who ran the foster home at that time. And they theorized that the stepdaughter may have had this pregnancy because obviously at that time, if you weren't married and you had a child out of wedlock, yeah, big no-go. It was like very much looked down upon.
So he might have been a bastard.
Yeah, exactly. And that would have been very looked down on. So
social outcast.
Yeah, and so they think that they ended up disposing of the boy's body, so that the mother, the stepdaughter of the man who ran it, would not be exposed as being an unwed mother. And he theorized that he believes the boy's death would have been an accident.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. If you've got a foster home, back then there weren't any kind of like massive regulations on treatment in foster homes.
Not probably
Yeah.
massive regulated files of like the children that were there.
Especially if it's a hidden pregnancy.
Exactly.
They'd probably just be like, oh, this baby turned up at our doorstep.
Yeah.
Shocking.
That would explain why there was no like
Shook. He's got
evidence
no
of the
documentation.
birth. Yeah, exactly. No fingerprints, nothing like that.
Baby just randomly shows up and they're like, oh, this is a foster home. Somebody left him here. Clearly.
I do also want to point out that the boy had evidence of he had like wrinkled skin. So you know when like you've been in the bath a bit too long, and your skin starts to wrinkle. So they believe he was in at some point before his death, and it had to be quite close to his death. Some kind of body of water. Doesn't have to be a lake. Could have just literally been like what I said, like a bathtub. So he theorized in that theory that maybe he accidentally was drowned in the bath.
Maybe they put him in the bath and cut his hair.
Yeah.
To get rid of any evidence.
Or cut his hair after he was in the bath because he still had hair on him.
Yeah. Clean the body.
Dispose of it.
That explains why he's got the wrinkly pruny fingers. Get him out. Dry him off. Cut his hair. Wrap him in the blanket. In the box. Off we go.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. And obviously they would have had to go far because it was quite close to the woods that he was found in. So that's one theory.
Okay.
I believe more so in the second theory that we're about to go into.
Okay.
I just, it's a bit more recent, and I feel like in terms of the evidence that the police gave out,
makes more sense.
Yeah, there was more in this theory of evidence that the police hadn't really shared with the public than there was the first one.
Okay.
So the next theory is called the woman named Martha, or M, in this point. So, in about 2004, so recent times, a woman, or M, well, let's just call her Martha for the sake of it. I don't know if that is correctly her name, but
we're going to call her Martha.
Yeah, just for ease's sake.
Her name is Martha.
So Martha claimed, she come to the police and she claimed that her abusive mother, many years ago, had purchased a boy who was very strikingly similar to the boy in the box. Apparently the boy was called Jonathan. No one's ever really been able to confirm that. They found that out from, Martha found that out from apparently his birth parents in the summer of 1954. Lots of people like linking this theory to the previous one I mentioned, the boy in the foster home.
Okay.
Could be the same boy.
Okay.
So the boy she talked about, her mother buying, was subjected to extreme physical and sexual abuse in their household, which she saw growing up. And apparently that lasted about 2.5 years of abuse, which would explain a lot of the malnutrition, the scars, all that kind of thing, yeah.
The chin, the weird L-shaped scar, probably from hitting his chin on something solid.
So apparently she said that one evening at dinner, the boy threw up his meal of baked beans, right, hear me out, and was severely beaten. With his head slammed against the floor until he was semi-conscious.
Oh.
Apparently he was given a bath while semi-conscious, during which he died. So it could have been from the drowning, from, the bath, or it could have been from the head trauma.
Massive head injury that you just got.
Exactly, because he was semi-conscious. They might have left him alone, come back, he'd accidentally slipped under the water.
And drowned.
Now the thing is, these details that I'm about to say had not really been shared by the police.
Okay.
So when they did the examination of the boy, they found that the last thing in his stomach
baked beans
was baked beans.
Okay.
Yeah. And that, obviously, like I said, his fingers were water wrinkled, so that would make sense with her story. And obviously, if they had bought the boy, it probably would have been from, some dodgy business. And, doubtfully
the purchase of humans doesn't tend to be a reputable establishment.
If it's some dodgy business, if it's, for example, someone selling their child because they had it out of wedlock, if they're born at home, there will be no record of the boy.
Maybe that's how they got the boy there. They just put the boy and just like a package in the box and just took him to the thingy, and that's how they got the bassinet box.
Maybe. I don't know.
I can't imagine they'd walk the boy that they don't claim to have just casually into another house.
True.
And the package makes it look a lot more...
And at least they'd have the box then.
Normal.
Would also explain why the box wasn't found at the box site of the previous place. Because, the last people to have the boy would have the box, so...
The box went with the boy.
Exactly, literally.
Like a belonging. That's really sad.
Martha also said that her mother had also cut the boy's very distinctive hair after the bath, after he died. Which, again, matches.
Fits.
Yeah. The police had also described it as a very unprofessional haircut, so it was done in kind of like hasty.
Like a hack job.
Yeah. Do it yourself, make it quick, that sort of thing. She said that they had done it to conceal his identity because, like I said, the hair had been quite distinctive.
Okay.
So if they hadn't cut the hair, then he would have probably been maybe recognised.
Okay. Hair on a boy like that would have been definitely an identifying feature.
Sure. And she also says that her mum forced her to assist in dumping the boy's body in the woods, in the box.
Ooh.
It's a very
that's spicy.
Strong theory.
Yeah.
However,
little plot twist.
So the reason that this one isn't described as the theory of how he died is so the woman was quite often described as mentally ill. So Martha. Yeah. So especially
if she dumped a young boy's body in the middle of a wooden box after everything she saw, I imagine she probably would have a couple of mental illnesses. Yeah.
Exactly, but in this case, instead of thinking like that, they thought the opposite. It'd be like, oh, she's a bit mentally ill, maybe she's making it up.
It's a lot of details to serendipitously get correct.
Especially with the baked beans, that was not something that was very put out there. That was the last thing in his stomach. That fact is not mentioned in any other theory.
Yeah.
That is the only one.
Of all the things in the world that a neglected boy could be eating,
you could
baked
say
beans is not the go-to that one would say. There's a lot of things you could say.
Yeah, I'd say, bread.
Bread. Yeah, crackers. Cheap things like that.
Yeah.
Soup.
No, beans. Yeah, they hit it right in the head. Ticks so many boxes.
But
I think that could be it.
They got caught up on the mentally ill bit.
Yeah, the police
like mentally ill means you're a liar.
Yeah, and the police have also talked to her neighbours, Martha's neighbours. And Martha's neighbours clearly did not seem to get along with Martha because they were all like, oh, she's mentally ill, she's a bit crazy, I won't listen to anything she says. So
they didn't listen to anything she said.
Yeah, and that was the end of that theory. That was that. Yeah.
Which is a shame because that sounded the most creditable out of everybody.
Exactly. I personally, I think that's what happened. I think she's telling the truth. I mean, she's literally implying herself. She's putting herself into the crime as well.
I mean, yeah.
Helping to hide the body. So
as a minor, though.
True, but it's not really something you go around admitting to people, is it?
No.
Oh, I helped conceal the body of a boy when I was younger.
Remember that boy that went missing? Yeah, I helped dump his body with my deranged mother.
It's not something you really go out and tell people. Like, first fact, tells a fact about you. Oh, I went, as a kid, I helped dump this body.
You play two truths and a lie.
Yeah. Which is the lie?
Which is the lie? I know, it depends what day of the week it is, boys.
How much trauma do you want to dive into? Let's face it.
Oh my god.
And she went to the police of her own accord. So, I think maybe she thought maybe it was time the truth came out. And you know what? It fits perfectly. So I personally think that is the theory.
There's a lot of details there.
Exactly.
I get it.
Yeah.
Like, I was all for the foster home theory, but that one...
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I get
suspicioso.
I get why people think, you know, maybe those two theories could be linked. Maybe it was the child of the stepdaughter of the owner of the foster home.
Quite possible.
They're all in pretty close quarters. I don't know how many people live in Philadelphia in this time to say if it was like a big or small place, you know, where everyone knew each other.
Yeah.
But
it also depends what areas. Some areas, Philadelphia, very built up. Some of them very rural.
Exactly.
You know?
Could have been in the more rural
The inclination
side.
of the field makes me think rural. It also adds to the stigma. The less people are, the more stigma.
Exactly, yeah.
You don't have much anonymity in a small kind of town vibe.
Especially if the stepdaughter's dad who owned the foster home was quite reputable. Something like that getting out would be quite known about around the town. There's other small theories, like, for example, that he may have been drowned in the lake that was nearby, which would explain the water, but not really much else.
Yeah, I don't think that's true though, because if they had drowned him in the lake...
And that could have been anyone have drowned him in the lake.
Anybody drowned him in the lake. Yeah. They would have to have something to cut his hair.
They'd have to have the box.
They'd have to have the box with them.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine they'd have to have somewhere to hide the clothes, because I can't imagine that they just randomly find a 6 to 10-year-old boy walking around naked in the woods.
Exactly. Like, where would they put... Like, why would they leave their evidence? The hat?
Yeah. The hat and the scarf. Why?
The blanket? Like, I'm not really one for that one.
I'm not... no.
There is this other person who was a forensic artist at the time called Frank Bender. And he believed and developed a theory that... And they have looked into this, but again, not much came about it. There was also a sketch done for this, but again... No one could still identify the boy. So there was a theory that the victim may have been raised as a girl and had long hair, and that's why it was cut.
That's why it was distinctive.
Yeah. And that would make sense with a child's unprofessional haircut. And that was basically just the basis for that theory.
I think if you've got a neglected kid, I can't imagine you're going to take the time to cut his hair. Which means probably, chances are, it's going to be on the long, shaggy side anyway.
And, like, the thing is, that goes against, especially, like, the drowning one. I'm pretty sure the haircut would have been postpartum, because if he'd have been in water, there wouldn't have been, like, that much
hairs would have washed
hair.
off.
Yeah. And the thing is, there wasn't, like, hair found anywhere else. So the hair must have been done at a primary location as to where he died.
Yeah.
Not at the place where the box was found.
Yeah, which would explain why the lake isn't involved, because then there'd be hair next to the lake, and that's kind of a little bit of a giveaway.
Yeah, unless, they pushed it into the lake, but that's going a bit far. I don't know. So that's
sloppy.
Yeah, and I'm not, like, I understand why they thought about maybe he was raised by a girl, like, as a girl, and they did do a sketch where they basically did the same sketch, but put him with long hair. Yeah. And again, nothing came from it, so bit of a dead-end theory. Not the strongest.
Not the strongest, no.
And, to basically end off, like I said, it's still unsolved, which is a shame. It's been quite a few years and still nothing. The second theory is, like I said, the strongest one, and that came in 2004, but again, not being confirmed.
And it's been a while since 2004.
Yeah. He was buried, and then he had to be exhumed a few years later for DNA for his teeth. Nothing came from that. And then he was reburied in Philadelphia.
Okay.
And the grave and burial was all paid for by the detectives in that area.
Adorable.
Because obviously he had no family to pay for it. And they, thought that this boy deserved a grave.
Yeah. And a marker and everything.
And he has a large headstone, and it just reads America's Unknown Child.
That's really sad.
Yeah. And the city residents like to keep it fresh, and they like to keep the grave decorated with flowers and stuffed animals, even to this day.
That's adorable.
So we will never really know what
It's a
happened.
very, very sad one to start with.
It is, my bad. I told you it was sad before we started.
I know you did.
You know, we've got some gruesome ones, don't worry, coming up. But, yeah, that is the sad tale of the boy in the box. Again, I still think it's theory number 2. I think it's Martha's mum.
I think.
That's the strongest
out of
one.
everything. Yeah, I think I agree with you.
Yeah.
Bit suspect, though.
It's a bit suspect, but nothing more was ever done with that
Because
theory.
surely Martha's mum would have been trackable.
Unless she was dead. And that's why she was coming forward.
That would be true. If her mum was dead.
Because then she's not going to get in trouble from her mum for talking about it. So I reckon she's probably waited until mum died.
To come forward.
Then, yeah. But that is all on that theory. That's it.
Well, that was a roller coaster.
Yeah.
That was an absolute roller coaster of a case. A boy in a box. That's a little bit depressing. Yeah. Huh.
So now, to be less depressed, we shall feast on donuts at some point. It is your birthday, so I am so sorry.
Thank you.
We have started on such a depressing note for your birthday.
We have, but you know what? Let's do one of the good ones on my birthday.
It's a pretty notorious case, so we had to start off on a
baffles me though, because did not know that existed.
Well,
how do you find these, Josh? I don't want to know how you find these things.
You don't know.
But
it's all good. So, that was the first episode of BBTruecrime. Beth and Becky here learning about crime from one B to another.
Well, exactly. Me learning all the juicy goss on gory deaths.
Yeah, and me getting to recite my favourite true crimes.
You're a bit of a crime nerd.
Yeah, a little bit. It's okay. It runs in the family.
My donuts. So adios. See you later.
Come back next week.